Are you tired of getting squeezed by Amazon, watching your BSRs fall, watching more overseas competitors come and overtake your market share, watching the race to the bottom pricing? Well, today's guest has the answer for you of how to diversify yourself off of Amazon and how to continue the profitable growth off of Amazon. Welcome to the Ecomm Breakthrough Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Hadley. I scaled my own brand from 0 to 8 figures in sales, and now my mission is to take it to over 9 figures. On my journey to 9 figures, I bring you unfiltered conversations with the smartest minds in e-commerce. Past guests include Kevin King, Ezra Firestone, and Michael E. Gerber, author of The E-Myth. Today, I'm excited to welcome to the show John LeBaron, the CRO at Pattern, the leading e-commerce accelerator that helps brands scale profitably across marketplaces worldwide. John runs the SaaS and services business units for Pattern and oversees all global go-to-market activities for the company and its partners. Prior to joining Pattern, John ran marketing for the Google Cloud business at Rackspace and has held a variety of global marketing roles with leading tech companies including Apple, Cisco, and Ciena. He holds an MBA from Kellogg School of Management, an MSW from Columbia University, and a BA in Communications from Brigham Young University. With that introduction, welcome to the show, John.
Thank you so much, Josh. Thanks for having me.
John, it's not often I have someone with so many acronyms behind their name on the podcast, but you've got a wealth of education behind you.
Yeah, it makes me think I spent too long in school listening to that bio. So thanks for making me feel old.
Hey, well, you've got what I love, though, is you've got so many years and experience in international marketing. And I think that is extremely valuable, especially where we find ourselves in today's kind of like e-commerce landscape. With that being said, John, I would love for you to just give everybody like a brief overview of like, what is Pattern? I think many people have heard of it. I know you guys have your own conference that you do every year as well. So why don't you give people a quick overview of like what Pattern does and why you're working with so many different e-commerce brand owners right now?
Yeah, you bet. So when I joined the company 8 years ago, it was actually called iServe, which some people may remember if you've been in the space long enough. We are Amazon's largest seller. We are also a gold star partner on Tmall, and we also represent a ton of brands across more than 60 marketplaces, including TikTok, Target, Walmart, etc. And super excited to be able to work with you guys and help any of your audience members. And basically, if you think about Pattern, we kind of grew up on the buy sell model. So we work with probably more than 300 brands on this buy your inventory and then represent you on these marketplaces around the world, take you global. And it's all around profitable growth. And so I guess the value proposition is more or less like, do we think we can do it better, faster, cheaper than you could do it on your own and grow you more profitably than you could do on your own? So that's kind of the value proposition. We work with a number of huge brands like Nestle and Tumi and Sylvania and Panasonic and a ton of big brands like that. And so we're super data driven. We have a technology platform. We have more than 29 patents and more than 400 people working on development and AI. And so it's a super fun business. And I would say like what Pattern is compared to what it was, we continue to innovate and grow and evolve. And so I think that's what's kept me here for these 8 years. And we continue to sell on new platforms, can innovate the business model and the products that we offer. And so just generally, I think we're super dialed in and thinking about the experience that we have and that we can offer to these respective brand partners and try to be a good citizen kind of in this e-commerce space and learn from other people and deliver a solid opportunity and experience to the brands that we work with.
Awesome. Well, I love that. Well, and with that territory comes with working with a lot of different brands and seeing what's working, what's not working. And I think you are familiar with this. Like the story for the last, I feel like 18 months on Amazon has been, hey, lots of people losing bestseller rankings, bestseller badges, lots of pressure from overseas competition with the impact of tariffs and FBA fees. Margins are getting squeezed, and it just seems to be like a race to the bottom. Nobody's increasing prices. Instead, prices are only getting cheaper on Amazon. Is that what you're seeing from brand owners that are coming to you? And what are some of the things that you guys are helping them with to try to like correct those problems where there is a decline in growth and they're no longer like the easy button is no longer there on Amazon like it once was.
Yeah, I mean, everything you just talked about is 100% what we deal with day to day. I think the incursion of, overseas sellers that we've heard, some represent 40 to 50% of all sales on the platform are kind of these Chinese or overseas sellers. I think, Amazon is trying to squeak out more margin on their logistics front, with is it inbound placement fees and discontinuing prep. They're starting to, have an incursion on CPCs on a more aggressive stance than we've ever seen. I think they're a $50 billion advertising company at this point, which is, pretty daunting as well. So I think that the squeeze, so to speak, that brands are facing is 100% real. This kind of softness in growth, or, hey, it doesn't seem as easy to grow as it used to be, this is getting super complex, is absolutely a recurring theme. I think in terms of, as I again started 8 years ago, Amazon was often the fastest growing channel for brands. Sometimes it was the most profitable, sometimes it wasn't. But I would say, it's a bad time to set up shop as quote unquote an accelerator, because a lot of brands you talk to are like, I don't need an accelerator. I'm accelerating just fine. And so the tables have absolutely turned. That makes it harder for us to accelerate brands for sure. But I think, that layered on with the complexity across all of these different functions. And if you've ever heard us talk or visit our website or, whatever, I think we're absolute zealots around something we call the e-commerce equation, which is revenue as a function of traffic times conversion times price times availability. And I think that's very much the way that we think about accelerating brands, is just isolating those specific variables of the equation and really going to work on, okay, for traffic, for example, there's paid traffic, there's organic traffic, there's off-platform traffic, and what are all the hundreds of different kind of atomic levers that we want to pull and automate increasingly via AI for the brands that we represent, and then helping them set an expectation, helping them forecast appropriately, helping them understand what is their upside. We're sitting across 46 trillion data points, and really helping connect the dots for those brands to give them a realistic perception of what is my upside? Where do I have easy winnability across my different keywords that I'm not bidding on today that I should be? And so I think as we can provide more transparency, more clarity around those levers to pull, and more true fidelity around what their actual upside is, it's really up to the brand on whether or not, quote unquote, the premium of working with someone like a Pattern is worth it, or whether they think they can do it on their own. And, it's not really up for us to say what that looks like, but I would say we're seeing a lot of acceleration in the business. And I think it's an important signal for brands. Hey, this is getting pretty complex for them to do it. And yeah, margins are kind of shrinking, but the cost of doing it on their own is in some cases prohibitively expensive versus kind of quote unquote the tax they might pay to accelerate using someone like a Pattern.
I love it. So, John, I'm sure the listeners are probably like, "Hey, what is the magic sauce? What's the secret behind your guys' success there? What are you guys able to do? Let's say there's a new brand owner and they want to come to you guys. What are the different levers that you guys are able to pull specifically on Amazon today that's able to accelerate growth? What are some of the mistakes you're seeing being made by brand owners? What are some of the levers that you're like, oh, you haven't been doing this, this, and this? We're easily going to turn that on, and that's going to help you be more defensible, etc. Maybe walk me through how you work with a new brand owner and some of those levers that you're helping them pull.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the very highest level, it just starts with control. How in control is the brand? Because control at the atomic level, so to speak, is very much a microcosm of control at the macro level. And if you don't control kind of the easiest things, like who is selling your product, or, are you in stock? Those are kind of the easiest kind of layers. And then you can kind of build up from there. But I would say that the lack of control often gets magnified across the rest of your channels, not only on Amazon, but across everything. And so that's probably the number one thing that we really focus with on brands. And again, this may not be as applicable to some of your sellers, because some of the sellers, maybe, I guess they could be arbitrage sellers. They could be sellers like a Pattern where they partner exclusively with a brand, or they could be brand owners themselves selling and going through. But I would say, almost universally, we find a lack of control as a rate limiter on the growth of a given brand. And so as we think about that e-commerce equation, maybe I'll start at the far end: availability. Like, are you in stock? If you're not in stock, why? And what piece of your availability is shipping Prime, for example? We know that if you're not shipping Prime and you're shipping, kind of snail mail or even out of your own facility, the gone are some of the days of like seller fulfilled Prime or FBA on site or some of these other programs. We still are actually involved in a lot of those because we kind of grew up in this world and have a lot of grandfathered kind of things that we do. But I would say as a general rule, like that's an easy thing to kind of fix often. I guess like profitability notwithstanding, there's a lot of good reasons not to have stuff go FBA. But that's a thing that we look at a lot. And I guess like some of the reasons you might not want to go FBA, given some of the new placement fees, is it's incredibly complex to make sure that you kind of have what I would call edge of the network. I grew up in the kind of like optical networking space and building, data centers and networking and things like that. But you think about the corollary of, Meta and Netflix, et cetera, getting their content to the edge of the network is really, really important. And FBA or Walmart Fulfillment Center or Fulfilled by TikTok and all this other stuff is very much that same kind of a thing. And so if you cannot get your inventory to that edge of the network, your BSR will suffer. You will not be shown in as many searches. You won't have as many glance views as those that are really, really good at it. Again, some of the rate limiters that we see with a lot of brands is like, it's kind of expensive. Maybe they're paying a lot of inbound placement fees, maybe to ship to a number of different facilities to accommodate that. They're going to have to extend themselves on inventory. And maybe that's just not, from a cash flow perspective, a sustainable option. But not only that, especially like this time of year, we're recording this in October. I know this is going to be in February. So, but think about just like the holiday season and how long does it take you to get into those fulfillment centers? Like, Pattern has the benefit of scale. And so our turnaround from like our cross dock into actually being in stock in Amazon is often less than 48 hours, which is just, I hear brands talking about like, it takes us 3 weeks. Like, we're trying to set up appointments to get in our inventory in September, October, and Amazon saying it's too late. And so we actually have a number of large sellers that are using us as a 3PL at this point. That's a fairly new service that we started to offer. And sometimes we'll do the prep for them. Sometimes we'll ship inbound. Sometimes they'll only use us for our middle mile infrastructure to get into those because, again, we're shipping skis and luggage and pill bottles and stuff like that. And so the density matters. Someone can actually ship to one location full truckload and then ensure that their products are also getting full truckload into that edge of the network. That becomes a pretty simple thing. I say in terms of that pricing component and basket size, so to speak, that is also really affected by the control. Because if you have a lot of other sellers that are kind of forcing that race to the bottom with Amazon, you're going to have a degradation in pricing. So that's another thing that we look at with brands is what is the kind of trajectory of pricing over time? And is it collapsing? And we run full, pretty aggressive, because of the data we sit on, pretty aggressive like price elasticity analysis of demand to help brands understand, okay, what are their competitors pricing at? What do we think their upside is? In the category, if you raise price, what is going to happen? And I would say that we've successfully raised price on probably more than half of our brands, even this year alone. And so I don't think it's like a foregone conclusion that price is that lever. It's the easiest lever to pull, but it's also the most punitive lever to pull. And then when you think about, I don't want to go on forever here, but if you think about traffic and conversion, there is a lot from a data-driven perspective that you can do to optimize. And I would say, back to your question, what are some of the common mistakes that you're seeing? I mean, at a very high level, not optimizing their content in a very data-driven way, kind of using what I would call best practices, but not really. You can look at the keyword level, conversion level at the conversion rates at the keyword level to understand across your whole category. Now, this is hard at scale, but AI is making this way easier to understand kind of the micro changes you should be making to your content to convert at a higher level. I'm happy to provide ample examples there. On the traffic perspective, what we see very often, brands kind of renting keywords versus owning keywords. And it's because the rents are going up all across the kind of marketplace. It is just becoming somewhat untenable, and budgets are getting exhausted early days, despite even things like, algorithmic bidding and day parting and some of these like fancy sorts of like topics, it doesn't matter. If you're bidding on the wrong keywords and you don't actually ever own those organically, you're kind of on a race on a treadmill that is not probably going to get better before it's going to get worse. And so I think that's generally the tenor that we go in with brands. And again, we own the patent on this, so it's easier for us, but it's like really working with brands to understand where do you have mathematical propensity to win across keywords, and where can we start to reinvest dollars into those so that you're not just renting, you're renting to own. And so you're renting, and then eventually, like I would say the number one thing that we see across the brands we work with is the keywords on which they are winning organically is increasing over time. If that is not happening with a brand, they should fire us immediately. But that's what we see, and those keywords become annuities through which the brand can start to generate revenue, own revenue, and then either be able to invest that in other types of areas or take it back to the bottom line to offset some of those rising costs they're seeing in some of those other areas that I discussed.
Yeah. John, really good summary. There's a lot to unpack there.